The new quarter is fast approaching, and with it comes the next round of the Change Your Life Challenge. I want to be fully prepared to hit the ground running come day one, so in this video, let's set up our Change Your Life action plans together. For this, you'll need the Change Your Life workbook, which is linked in the description box below, but let's jump to the desk and get started. Here we have the free workbook, which I just printed off on my home printer. I could probably get it bound or something, but it's all just loose leaves of paper. That's fine though, because this is just for planning. It is okay if things don't look perfect, it is okay if the information is not perfect, but the intention is that it's going to get us ready for the quarter ahead. Notably, this is just our cover page, we don't really need that. We have some information or some kind of like introductory words to get us started. So talking not only about the Change Your Life community and the space that we have set up over there to help people have some kind of accountability with this challenge, but also Epic Goals, which is also hosted in the same place. I don't really need to read this though, because I wrote it, so we'll just flip over from there. But the first activity we need to do is look at our available time across the quarter. Mainly because when it comes to figuring out how many goals we're going to tackle, or what type of goals we're going to tackle, we need to account for how much time we will realistically have to work on our goals. Because while it's all good and well to give yourself a list of 25 projects and goals you want to accomplish, if you do not have the time to accomplish all of those in the quarter ahead, you're kind of just setting yourself up for disappointment. So these are our instructions, we'll scoot those to the side, and this is the actual available time worksheet. So step 1, prepare your calendar by labeling the top row with the days of the week. I left it open because I know some people prefer to have a Sunday start and some prefer a Monday start. I personally prefer a Monday, so MTW, so on and so forth. But we can check off that we have done that. We're going to keep track as we go. And the week numbers down the side. This one is because I personally prefer to do all of mine related to week numbers. Like all of my goal planning in terms of when I'm going to do what, I will tie it to the week numbers of the quarter. 7, 8. And then my quarter ends on week 13, so we do have week 14 here, or week 1 of the next quarter. But having done that, a good next step is to label the boxes with the dates that they represent, just so that we can keep track of what each of these boxes actually means. So starting on the 29th of December and going all the way through to the 5th of April. Though, as said, I'll probably just focus on the first 13 weeks that we have here. While it isn't strictly necessary to go and label all of the day numbers for all of these different dates, I do find it very helpful when it comes to doing the future step. For instance, being able to actually go in and log the dates that you won't be available to do stuff. In this template, we also have some light grey lines going through each of the boxes, just in case you wanted to consider each day in terms of a morning, afternoon, and evening period. Because for instance, just if you have something happening in the morning of one of these days, doesn't mean you can't use the afternoon for goal getting, or another time period. Even if you don't use the lines to break the day down into chunks, you can also just use it to keep your handwriting straight. In setting up the template as well, I also decided not to put in the day numbers because, as said, I don't want to prescribe people what day of the week their calendar should start on. If they want a Monday or a Sunday or any other day start, I want them to be able to set it up in that way. But I also want you to be able to reuse this workbook with each quarter, so just printing off a fresh copy, putting in the dates that are applicable, and going from there. Now as we have those in though, we can check off this one, and the entire step 1 is done. But for step 2, cross out any dates that fall outside of the date range of the next quarter. Now this one is in particular quite helpful for if you're thinking about a January 1st start, so crossing out these 3 days and then anything that comes after the end of March. For me, I'm going to be starting mine on the 29th, so 1 through 13 is all good, but I don't really need to consider the first week of cycle 1 of quarter 2, that isn't necessary. I'm just focusing on the first 13 weeks. Our next step though is where we actually start to see how much time will be available to us. So using your planner or your calendar, mark in where you won't be available to do goal work. So we're thinking about events and appointments, holidays, travel periods, anything that's going to take us away from being able to get things done in terms of our goals and projects. So thinking about mine, I am taking a trip away with my family, and that one is happening in here. Technically we leave on the 4th, so I'll mark that one in as well. And we're going to be away for this week as well. I also want to put in a little bit of recovery time after that because I typically need some recovery time after a trip away. I also have another trip happening down here in March, so I want to mark that one in. And you can see it's a little messy, but it's all good. That's why we're doing it on here, not in our very pretty planners or our journals or anything like that. This is our scribbly plan. It's all good if it's a bit of a mess. But this one here is Korea. We're then transferring over to Singapore partway through there. We're then gonna need some recovery time. And for this one, we're going to Christchurch. In terms of other events we have our book club meetings. Those are good to note. So that is gonna be GBC for Goober's Book Club. That one's also happening on the 1st here, and another one on the 1st here, and also on the 29th down here. We also have our team hangouts, which take up about half of a day for me usually, so we'll put those ones in, with another on the 8th and the 8th of March as well. And another event that's happening is going to be New Year's Eve. That one I'm going to be spending with my friends, so I'm probably not going to do a lot of goal work on that day, so we can put that one in, NYE. And I do typically like to make week 13 reset week, so we're going to highlight that one. That's not to say that goal work can't happen, but I do typically like to set that week aside as time to intentionally work on getting myself cool, calm, and collected for the next quarter. What you might also like to log in here are any kind of like busy periods for work. So if you know that around this block of time you're going to have a lot of reports to do, or extra meetings, or anything like that, stuff that might kind of deplete your energy, you could put that in there as well. But checking off number 3, because we've done the events, appointments, holidays, and travel. Actually, we totally missed one. I have a dentist appointment here. We're going to put that one in too. It probably won't take all that long, but I still want to note it down. But the next thing is mark in any regular weekly and monthly commitments that will limit your goal time across the quarter. So for instance, if you know that like every Thursday evening you have some kind of event to go to, and that would otherwise be like prime time for goal work, we note all of those ones in. Similar idea with like my Wednesday hangouts. I have my midweek mafia hangout. It happens every Wednesday, either at my place or a friend's place. So that time isn't going to be dedicated to goal work time. So I'll put that in with MWM as midweek mafia. I assume that we're probably not going to do midweek mafia on this week because the Christchurch trip is with the midweek mafia people. So we'll just put that on the next week. And we'll also probably have it during reset week as well. Not going to have it while I'm away, but I will have it for New Year's Eve because those people are going to be the ones I'm hanging out with. Other regular commitments I have are that Mondays are always an editing day, so I can put that in. I'm just going to put an E for edit because I know what I mean, but editing typically takes me most of the day, and it usually leaves me feeling kind of depleted in terms of energy, so I probably won't want to do a lot of other stuff that day. And I also have a regular live stream happening on Thursdays, so we can put L for live stream, so I know that that's happening. And as we're going through and putting these things in, that's not to say that other stuff isn't happening. You know, we still have regular life to attend to, we still have the work period, you might have time dedicated to organizing things for your family, or your household, or whatever else, but this is just to give us a rough estimate of how many days across the quarter we would have at least some time to do goal work. Yes, we have 13 weeks of 7 days each, so what, 91 days? But not all 91 days are going to be available to us. Not at all. Now as we've marked in any regular weekly and monthly commitments, for the remaining time, account for unforeseen circumstances that may limit your use of this time. This could be due to illness, periods of lower energy, or anything else. Now as said, typically after travel, I need some recovery time. And although I've marked in 2 days, we're just gonna go out on a limb and say that I end up needing 2 more. Maybe I get sick or something like that. I also know that in this period here, I'm gonna be busy as heck just preparing video content for before I go away. So we're gonna put in another -4 just in case. And although the Christchurch trip is kind of small, we're also gonna put in a buffer day there. On the off chance that I get sick, we're going to give me another maybe 4 days of sick leave. But then we also have the days that I already highlighted. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 27, 28, 29, so 29 days as well that I'm not going to be using for goal work, or more so I'm going to be using it primarily for other things. So in accounting for all of these little subtractions, that's going to be about 40 days that I need to subtract from my 91, so 51 days remaining. That's not to say the ones I've marked in I can't do goal work on, and that's also not to say that these 51 days are just going to be used for goal work, but in checking these items off of our list, I will have roughly 51 days for goal work next quarter, and we can use that to give ourselves a guideline on how many goals we might want to set to work on across this period of time. I'm going to say that in terms of goals, I'm going to aim to set no more than 3. I like to have multiple things that I'm working on. It just gives me some flexibility and some choice in the matter. And in already kind of thinking about my goals, I know one of those is going to be much more like a full quarter of just working on it gradually, whereas the other two might not quite be like that. But we have done our available time exercise, so we can move this paper across. The next thing to do is brainstorming our goals. So as it says here, when it comes to writing out our goal ideas, there are two main ways we can do it. We can use a list or we can use a mind map. Typically speaking, I like to use both, and I've given you space for both in the workbook. So we have our brainstorming space for the mind map and our brainstorming list space. And while I could write those out here, I actually typically do this process in my goal planner, with my goal planner being this notebook for next year. I am so excited to use this, and I am going to be doing my full brainstorming of my goals in here. But for the sake of showing you how I would actually use the mind map space, I would start in the middle with the idea of 2026 or whatever period I'm looking at. I always add a little drop shadow to this. I don't know, it's just a habit, but 2026 in the middle. And then I would branch out into my different life areas. If you're not too sure what life areas are good for you or quite right, we do have some recommendations here and some areas to add some extra ones if you need. But you do not have to use every single life area. Not all of them are going to be applicable. Not all of them are going to be necessary. And even if it is an applicable life area, maybe you don't really want to set goals in it. That's totally fine as well. For me, I think that the main areas I want to set goals in are going to be physical health, work, and finances. And then from each of these, I would branch out into the things that I want to work on, possible goal ideas I have. And as our little blurb says, do not hold back here, alright? These are just going to be ideas. They don't have to be the things we're committing ourselves to for the next quarter. We just want to write down anything and everything that kind of piques our interest in terms of working on, or maybe addresses a pain point for us. We can pare down and narrow it down later. For right now, we're just getting our ideas out of our head. As said though, you just want to take those different life areas, break them down into your potential goals, and jot all of those down as well. The nice part about a mind map is that it's very easy to link ideas together, so you can see how one thought leads to another. But you do also have the general list space as well, just some simple lines that you can jot your ideas down on. The nice part about a list is that it is much more usable after the fact. You can also typically write things in full sentences, whereas on a brainstorm like this one with the mind map, usually this is just for shorter little snippets, key phrases, or general ideas. Taking my mind map, and I think we can write down some goals associated with this. So one of my goals for physical health in particular is going to be weight loss, continuing on my weight loss journey. So lose weight. For my work kind of related area, I think the main thing I want is some kind of administrative assistance. So somebody to help me do the kind of like admin around my work. So we'll write admin help. And for finances, I just want to learn more about how to manage my finances well, because I feel like although I'm good at saving, I don't really know a lot about investing or building financial security or anything like that. So I'm going to put this down as financial literacy. If I can remember how to spell literacy. It looks good enough. Again, this is just a rough plan. It doesn't need to be perfect. Once you have your brainstorm though, then it is time to select your goals. Now things to note here. What is the available time you have? If you only have like 20 days out of the next 91, you probably don't want to take on a massive project or multiple massive projects. It's also good to note the size of each individual goal. Not all goals are going to require the same amount of time and attention, and also just a personal preference around how many you want to work on at once. Some people will prefer to just select one core goal that they're working on and make genuinely huge progress in that area, whereas other people, like myself, prefer to have multiple things to work on because it's nice to have some flexibility and choice in what we're focusing on. As said, these are the three that I'm going to work on, and over here, rather than just writing exactly the same thing, I'm going to word them more as kind of what the goal is, just so I have them here as a reference. The goals I ended up writing down are lose weight, which doesn't have any wording change from the last time I wrote it down, but also hire someone to help with my work admin, and learn more about building financial health. I like that these three goals are quite different to each other and they're going to kind of target different life areas for me, but the next thing we want to do is plan those goals out. It's all good and well to set a goal, that is definitely a first step, but planning a goal is much more likely to lead to goal-getting success. We have some notes here about how to plan your goals out and brainstorm action steps and such, but when it comes to the next page, this is where you would actually write down what the goal is and the action steps you're going to take. And as I have 3 goals that I'm working on, ideally I would have printed off 3 copies of this, but we're just going to write an action plan for the lose weight goal, mainly because all this information I am going to end up putting into my goal planner, because that's where I actually write down all of the information for my goals. So as said, the goal is lose weight. But what exactly do I have to do in order to lose weight? That's what I'm going to be listing down here. So things that I like to think about when it comes to action steps are essentially the brainstorming steps here. So what do I know that I need to do for this? What is the first thing that I need to do for this? I like to think about it in terms of frequency. So what are the one-off steps, the weekly steps, the monthly steps, the daily steps that I have to do to work on this goal? Sometimes one of the first steps that we might need to take is a research step. Rather than just writing down research, I would usually like to be a little more specific. So researching a very specific thing or kind of problem area I foresee for the goal, and also time limiting it, because I feel like oftentimes good goals will die in the research stage, and I do not want that to happen to our goals. We kind of get into this mindset of feeling like we need more and more information so that we can take perfect action. That is not the case. We do not need that. But thinking about what I need to do for my weight loss goal, one of these things is going to be tracking my eating. And I personally prefer to track this in an app, but that is going to be a daily action. I have to do that every day. What I also need to do is plan my food so that I can get the right things at the supermarket. That is going to be a weekly task. One of the things I do that best holds me to eating nutritious foods is meal prepping. So that's going to be on there too. That one also being a weekly task. I also want to keep up with my daily exercise. And as part of that, I think I want to bring back a step goal for myself, because I haven't had that for this quarter and I feel like I've been kind of neglecting movement. So we'll put down step average of, I think 8,000 was good last time, so I'm going to go with 8,000 steps. That being per day, not like per week or anything. We also need to be able to keep track of it, so I'm going to have to do weigh-ins. I like to weigh in daily just because it builds a habit for myself, like a routine around doing that. It kind of just keeps it at the front of my mind, whereas for some people that would be really demotivating, so go with a system that best works for you in terms of that. Not saying that this is your goal either, but still. And as some more kind of one-off things, I think I would like to pick out some meals that I could meal prep ahead of time. So pick meal prep options. I think I'd like to do that maybe once per cycle. So I'll put down cyclic here. Related actions that are going to help with this are also getting better sleep. So I'm just going to write sleep down. That one's going to have a couple of steps underneath it. So like getting up at the same time each day. I don't know what time that's going to be, but it'll be sometime in the morning. So I'll write blank AM, and going to bed at the same time. So going to bed by blank PM. And although those aren't going to, in theory, be directly responsible for any weight loss, they are kind of like supporting routines. Another one is going to be hydration and getting a set amount of water per day, or maybe like an average, but I think that just hitting a certain threshold is going to be easier for me to track. So drink X liters per day. And while there might be some other one-off actions that I end up taking, I think that as an initial plan, this is looking pretty good. Of course, I've just done this for one of my goals. Ideally, you want to go through and do it for all of them. So given I have 3, do this 3 times over, 1 for each of them. But once you have those action plans, then it's time to think about when things are going to be happening. Part of this is going to be scheduling it in terms of like daily actions and when you'll do those, weekly actions and when those will happen, or across the quarter when a thing is going to happen if they're one-off tasks. But thinking about these kind of daily and weekly ones, one of my daily actions was tracking my eating. That one's going to happen in the evening because it's the end of the day, I've finished eating, so tracking makes sense there. Another one is daily exercise. I like to do that in the morning, just kind of gets it out of the way, because honestly, exercise and we're not the best of friends. We tolerate each other. I know it's important, so I like to do it first thing. Gives me a little win, and it means I don't have to do it later in the day. We have my sleep related ones, so get up by time AM, and in the evening go to bed by time PM. We also have my water drinking one, which in theory is kind of like I would do it throughout the day, but by the end of the day I hope to get to a certain level. In fact, by the afternoon I would hope to get to a certain level, so we're going to say hydrate up to insert literage here. And another daily one I have is the weigh-in, so we can put that down here as well, because I do my weigh-in at the start of the day. As you go through, what might be helpful is to just check them off so that you can see that you've accounted for them. So tracking my eating, doing the daily exercise, the step average of 8k, so we're going to say 8,000 steps. That's not to say I would do 8,000 in the evening, but I would check to make sure I've gotten to 8,000, so we can cross that off. Weigh in daily, done that one. We've put in the sleep related one, so we can cross those ones off, and we've put in the hydration one, so we can put that one there too. Then we have the weekly related ones. So in particular for me and my goal, that is prepping my food and planning my food. Now planning, we ideally try and do this on a Friday because Vogel wants to go and do the groceries on a Saturday. So sometimes it is necessary to check your plans against what other kind of structures you already have in your life, what other routines you've already established, or the people who are relying on you to do certain things at certain points in the week, or day, or whenever. So for me, that is doing the meal planning. So plan my meals on a Friday, which means that the groceries can happen on a Saturday. And although I'm not usually the one to do them, I'll just write it in anyway. And on a Sunday, this is where I will do my meal prep. So we can also cross off those weekly things that I'm gonna do. Now, as you can probably assume, these aren't the only things that happen in a week. We also have things that are already happening as part of our schedule, so do be sure to account for those as you go through and map this stuff down. Like if you already know that your Sundays are fully booked with like social events or other appointments or whatever else, don't give yourself an additional laundry list of things to do on a Sunday as well. The idea here is that we sprinkle those things throughout the week, make the workload a little bit easier for us to manage, and thus actually get this stuff done. But the next one I have is pick meal prep options. That is cyclic for me, so every 4 weeks. So if we move these ones over, which weeks will I actually be picking those meal options? Now, I think it's going to happen before a cycle starts. So a new cycle for me starts in week 1, in week 5, and week 9. And then week 13 is reset week, week 14, or week 1 of the next quarter. Those are where each of my new cycles start. So based on that, I would want to be picking out meal prep options the week before. So pick meal prep options, doing that in week 8 in preparation for week 9, also doing it in week 13 for week 1, doing it in week 4 for week 5, and in week 0 for week 1, but I don't have the space for that. What can be very useful here is looking at this quarterly action plan with reference to the available time activity we did before. For instance, in terms of mine, I know that week 2 and 3, I'm not going to be around to do a lot of one-off action steps, so there's no point in adding stuff to here. In fact, what I could do is just cross this out to say like, hey, do not schedule anything here. You are not going to be available. Similar idea with week 11. I'm away for like half a week there, and I probably won't have a lot of time to do goal actions that are one-off. This would be more like a maintenance mode type week. So maybe for week 11, I also cross off to say, yeah, not going to do anything there either. While when it came to the goal action plans and like brainstorming what actions you needed to take for your goals, I would do 1 page per goal. When it comes to mapping out when things are going to happen, I would do all of those together on these sheets, just to make sure that you're not overloading yourself, because if you've got a daily action plan and a weekly action plan and a quarterly action plan all separate for each of your goals, you can't see very easily where you've kind of like put too much on your plate. For instance, if I have a bunch of daily actions that I also have to do for my other 2 goals that I outlined, and I load all of those up in the evening, that's not going to make for a very peaceful transition to sleepy time. I don't really want that for myself, so putting all of them on these sheets together can just help you avoid overwhelm. Once you've got your action plans mapped out though, and when you're going to be doing what, the next activity is for tracking the goals. So how are you actually going to keep track of the progress you're making? How will you be able to say, yeah, here it is, pinpoint it, this is the progress I am making? So for the goals that I have set, first goal was losing weight, second goal was the admin help, and the third goal was financial literacy. And you can write them out as full goals, I'm just using the shorthand here. But the way I'm going to keep track of my progress of my weight loss goal is by weighing in and recording it via an app. That app that I use is usually the Fitbit app, but I also have an Excel document on my computer because I love Excel. In terms of the administrative help, that one I'm curious about. So maybe I could do it in terms of like the amount of time I spend doing admin each week. That could be one way that I track whether or not I have, successfully outsourced or delegated my admin to someone else. Or I could keep track of it in terms of a checklist of things that I need to do and whether or not I've done those steps towards working on the goal. Or I could do some kind of reflection and journaling. We do have some ideas
up here as to what you could use for your progress tracking. I think for mine, it'll mainly be a checklist. Either a checklist of stuff that needs to get done for admin in the week and like who did what, or a checklist of my work towards that goal and like, outlining the things that I could delegate. There are a lot of smaller steps within there, but hopefully you kind of get what I mean. For financial literacy and learning about building wealth, what I think I'm going to make for myself in terms of this is like a personal curriculum type deal. So setting myself some key like learning objectives that I want to hit, or things in particular that I want to be able to do or explain. So that one will kind of come under the idea of a checklist, but I'm going to specify that it'll be my personal curriculum learning objectives. Of course, for any goal, you might have multiple ways that you're keeping track. It could be keeping track of your work towards the goal versus keeping track of the outcome. For instance, in terms of my weight loss, I will have one tracker that is just dedicated towards keeping the streak alive. In terms of my exercise, that's more of like a keeping track of the inputs type system, whereas I'll also have a system for keeping track of the outputs, which is how much weight I lose. In general though, having a way to keep track of the progress we're making is incredibly important because it helps keep us motivated. But another thing that is also very important is obstacle planning, or what I typically call challenge planning, but because it's the Change Your Life Challenge, I figured that to save on any confusion, we're just going to call it obstacle planning for now. But this is essentially trying to pre-predict what challenges you might face as you work on your goals, and pre-planning how you're going to respond to them. So the activity here has two main sections. We have the challenge and response table, so writing out what is the challenge, how do you hope to respond in a positive manner, and then once you tie those things together, we can write down our obstacle intention. So if thing happens, then I will response. Thinking about challenges that I might face in terms of my goal getting. One of them is going to be just like feeling like I'm not making progress, or like, I'm not seeing the weight drop or anything like that. And the thing that I can do in response to that is review my tracker, because my tracker is going to show me how much progress I am actually making. And in particular, looking at my tracker over the entire length of time that I've been keeping track of my weight, because it's been many years, and the most recent portion of that is looking very favorable. Another challenge I might run into is getting sick and not being able to meal prep. Now, while here we want to think about how we would respond to that situation, what can also be useful to do as you go through is think about how you can make the challenge less likely to happen. So for instance, if I, get sick and I'm not able to meal prep, what could I have done before that to make it so that that isn't a problem? Like if I do get sick, it's not going to be an issue. I will have food to eat. Versus here, what am I going to do after the fact? Like once that happens, how could I respond to it? So the way that I could respond to this is by opting in for no prep meal prep, or essentially nutritious foods that I can have for breakfast and lunch that don't require preparation. So pick one of my no prep meal preps. But as said, I can also do something to safeguard myself against that and maybe do a double prep week or something where I batch not just the next 7 days of meals, but maybe 14 meals and like freeze half of them. Something like that could help. Another thing that could happen is falling off with healthy eating. And oftentimes I have a tendency to say like, oh, I'll just pick it up again next week, or oh, I'll just pick it up again next cycle. Instead, I think that my response that would be a lot more beneficial would be restarting where I'm at. So recommitting in the moment, moving forward, rather than saying, oh yep, at this kind of like specific date and time in the future, that's when I'll start up again. So restart in the moment. Another challenge that I might face is just like feeling like tracking my food is too much of a slog. So tracking food is too hard. And in particular, I'm thinking about logging it in my app and making sure that I'm logging the information in there accurately. So in particular, if I go out to eat, that's where things can get a little bit hard. But the app does come preloaded with foods. So in those cases, I'm just going to use a best approximation, because an approximation is better than not tracking at all. Notably, these aren't all the challenges that I'm going to face, but as you go through each of your goals, thinking about those things that could happen, and in particular the most likely things to happen, the things that are most likely to not only occur but also derail you from making further progress. What are those things? Predict what they are, and then plan out a positive response, something that is going to continue us moving forward as opposed to getting us completely derailed and not making any more progress. Once you've filled in the table though, then we want to write them down as intention statements. So if obstacle happens, then I will response. Having a look at mine, so the first one we had was if I'm feeling like I'm not making progress, what I'm going to do is review my tracker. I just need to write that down as a sentence. The statements I ended up writing down for myself were if I feel like I'm not making progress with weight loss, then I will review my weight loss tracker. If I get sick and can't do meal prep, I will opt for a no prep meal plan. If I fall off with healthy eating, then I will recommit in the moment, and if I find tracking a day of food too hard, I will use my best approximation. By having a predefined action to take if those situations come up, it's more likely that we end up doing a behavior that is more positive for our goals rather than something that actively works against them. By doing this full process for all of your goals though, then you're going to be really well set up for the quarter ahead. Notably, I've only done this for one of the goals, so I'm going to have to go back and do it for the others. But I do at least know some of the obstacles that I could face. I know how I'm going to track my goal work. I know when I need to do what, at least for one of them. And in particular, the routines that I'm going to need to keep track of. But all of this is just the rough plan. Now I need to go and put it into my goal planner for realsies, and eventually into my everyday journal too.
I am feeling so much more prepared for the quarter ahead, and while my plan isn't perfect, that's fully okay. Realistically, when it comes to goal work, all we need is our next concrete action step. And I definitely have at least that. If you wanted a little bit more guidance on how to get your action plan sussed for the quarter ahead, get yourself feeling cool, calm, and collected, ready to tackle your goals, then this video is the next one to check out. That one is our starter guide for preparing for the Change Your Life challenge, and while in this video I talked through how I'm setting up for my challenge, in that one I explain a lot further about the key considerations you'll want to do in prepping for yourself. It's definitely worth a watch, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.